everybody. Welcome in. I'm so excited to have y'all here. You can feel free to have your videos on or keep your videos off, whatever is most comfortable for you. Thank you so much for being here. We'll give people a couple minutes to file on in. But I'm really excited for what we've got going today. I'm going to pop a form in the comments. So if you have any questions, if something pops up as we're talking, you can either type that question right in the comments, or you can put it in the form if you want to ask it anonymously. Go for it there. Otherwise, we will have a Q&A period at the end. So if you've got questions, you can come on and ask them live of our panel of experts. So let's dive into it. I'm really excited to have y'all here. I'm really excited to have these incredible creators here. Our massive main goal today is to hopefully inspire some folks to start creating content, because it's scary and it's hard, but it's not so hard and scary that y'all can't do it. So we're going to give you some starter tips and information where we got started, some general equipment, tools, and tips for different areas of media. So podcasting, video, blogs, journalism, all of it. So let's do some intros. How about that? Let's start with, we'll go kind of round robin. Morgan, let's start with you.
Hi guys, I'm Morgan Tencza. I'm a sports photographer and social media manager. I currently work with Sporting Jacks. We just rebranded in December. I'm still getting used to being able to say the name out loud. The USL Championship and Super League team that's coming in 2025, 2026. Freelance sports photographer, mainly with USA Today, but I've worked with a lot of MLS teams over the past couple of years. And I'm really happy to be chatting with you guys today.
Awesome. Morgan, if you can give us a little bit about how you got started, that would be great.
Yeah, so I got started pretty young with sports photography. I had an internship in 2018, right after my freshman year of college, with Bethlehem Steel, which was in USL Championship. It's an affiliate of Philadelphia Union, now rebranded as Union 2. The year after, I had an internship with the Philadelphia Union as both a photography and social media intern. I kind of did a little bit of everything, and that really opened the door to the world of MLS. Through that, built so many connections with different people in MLS media. So Tom Boger's a really close friend of mine, Andrew Wiebe, Matt Doyle, all those big name journalist people. And they opened the doors for me so many other places that before I even graduated college, I had a full-time job with USL, the headquarters, worked in Tampa for a bit, worked with a soccer marketing company called Force Soccer, and did a little bit of everything. I also worked with MLS Works during that time as social media, and I got to attend MLS Media Marketing Tour last year in San Jose, and that was really cool. Awesome experience if you ever get to go. And then now I'm at Sporting Jacks and kind of spending all of my weekends, especially during MLS season. I'll be in Orlando City this year, pretty much shooting every game with USA Today, which is really exciting because that's where I think my photography is best, is on the sideline of soccer games. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Laura, let's flip to you.
Hi, my name is Laura Gomez. I have been in sports for almost 12 years. I've done a lot of different sports, boxing, baseball, NFL, everything, but my niche really has been soccer or football, however you want to say it. I've done radio, TV, written, just everything in between in the middle, in Spanish and English. I've worked for small outlets, for big outlets. So it's been a wild ride doing sports, and specifically the past few years, just soccer. Yeah, and now I'm just kind of freelancing as well. We always have to keep going. It's something that's it transitions a lot, it changes a lot, and it's something that you just have to have a lot of love for and continue.
Amazing. Sophie, how about you?
Hey everyone. Firstly, it's very cool to be invited to the webinar and to be around and among a lot of talented, creative content folks. I don't know, I feel like I'm old enough to be everyone's mum here, in a really good way though. So my career started off in London. I worked in the entertainment industry actually for 20th Century Fox and Sony Pictures, which is kind of what brought me here, sorry, to the United States, and the Southern California area. I carried that on, but even while I was working in the industry in London and here, I had a passion for radio. And in the by day, I would be a publicist, and by night, I would go and host a little show on Greek radio, kind of my roots. And that gave me a platform to do other things in radio in the UK. And then when I moved over here, there was a show early on called World Football Daily, which was catering to soccer fans, not only who had a passion for MLS, which at the time when I first started, we'll get into that a little later, wasn't as insane as it is now. So the Premier League and really later on the Bundesliga opened up that audience. So I did a live show 2 or 3 times a week. And then after that, I moved on with a great journalist called Martin Rogers to the USA Today. And we had a soccer podcast called EPL Soccer Junkies at the time. And then just kind of like moved on and kept trying to create content. I worked with Jermaine Jones for a little bit on his podcast, and then just started my own thing. During that time, I'd created a platform called British Soccer Diva, and that evolved into starting a YouTube channel around Arsenal with Kevin Campbell, one of their former strikers. And in between all that, I've been able to do work for TalkSport and cover MLS and the US women's national team and men's team here, and do some bits for Sky News and BBC Radio London as well. So in a small nutshell, that's kind of like my journey. And I'm excited to share that with everyone today and help however I can with any young female journalists or broadcasters who are looking to make their mark in the industry.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Anne, how about you?
Hi, everyone. So number one, thank you for having me on. It's so awesome to be around all these like strong women. I'm loving that vibe. So I am not a professional by any means. I am a mom and a teacher, and my son has a YouTube channel called The Verde Minute, and I help him produce and content create and do all that different stuff. So naturally, being the mom and the teacher in me, our target audience was going to be always the kids. I think it's really, really important to get our youth involved. And that's also just a way for me to bond and connect with my own child and all of his friends. And so that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. I love it. Jessica, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Steph, for inviting me. I'm like, I don't have the soccer credentials. It's really fun, Laura, for me to see your face because I listen to your Houston Dash podcast. So it's always really fun to like see people that you've heard in your ears a lot. And I miss it, by the way. But let's see, I am an investigative sports journalist. So my main sort of area of expertise is gendered violence and sport, which is a sad little corner to occupy, but I'm actually a trained historian. I'm in school right now getting a PhD in sports studies at UT, doing a dissertation on women's basketball at UT in the 1970s. So women's sports historian, I guess I'll start saying. And I have done some soccer stuff. Like this is not little, but like I went to the World Cup in 2019 for the Huffington Post and wrote some pieces for them. I mainly focused on college football for a long time, but any chance that I got to pitch anything about women's sports at all, I was trying to do. And yeah, as far as men's soccer, I just watch it. And that's kind of the beginning and the end of it for me. But I'm excited to listen to the other experts here. Your careers are amazing and it's very fun to be here. So thank you. Oh, and I co-hosted a feminist sports podcast called Burn It All Down for about 5.5 years. We haven't been doing it for like the last year or so, but that was a weekly talky podcast that also had an interview segment. So I have a ton of experience in that particular area.
Amazing. We've got some really incredible voices here. And I think one of the things that I'm so excited about is that it's so cross-genre of what we're putting out for content. There's so much overlap, but we kind of all have our little our happy little corners of the world or our sad little corners of the media. And there are so many different angles that you can approach content and media from. And I think that that's one of the things I'm most excited for today is learning from y'all, because there's so much in y'all's areas of expertise that I just have never even tried to touch, and then hopefully getting a full picture of the options out there. So I guess for me, I'm Stephanie Crugnola. Soccer is the only sport that I enjoy watching for the whole thing, and that's mostly because I like to know exactly what to expect, and I know pretty much it's going to be 90 minutes, give or take a couple, or give a couple. It's not going to be a 2-hour fourth quarter, and so for my organization and maybe control freak mentality, soccer has always been the sport that I have enjoyed watching the most. I host a podcast called Swoon Tower Soccer, and that I do with my husband, and we are a spin-off of Moon Tower Soccer, which is the kind of tactics podcast for Austin FC. And then Mike and I on Swoon Tower, we cover the important things such as fashion, dogs, social media presence, and the stuff that make people excited to know and learn the players. And that's a really important thing for us, is that especially as MLS is growing in the US, we want to see those specials on who these people are as humans as well as soccer players, because that will help people become fans. It helps drive interest in the team in a deeper level, I think, than just the sports aspect of it. So for a long time, I kind of downplayed it as fluff pieces, but I think that it's really important to cover all aspects of a team and of the players. So that's a little bit about me. I've been doing content in podcast form for a little over a decade now, so that's really my area of niche. And yeah, so today we're going to go through some different mediums that you can jump into. We'll have our experts talk about their area of expertise, and then we'll take some questions. Most of all, I just want to start by saying that I'm happy that you're here watching live or on the recording on YouTube. Hello. There's so much MLS content out there. And I know that besides the fears of getting started and finding the equipment and doing all of that, there's a fear of there are already 7, 8, 9 Austin FC podcasts. Why does my voice matter? There are already 16 different blogs covering this team. Why should I get started? And I think that for female and non-binary creators, our voices are naturally outliers in MLS media, and that's a reason enough. But beyond that, it's not a competition. There's space for everyone. And I think the best thing we can do is to encourage each other to get started and make content. Find other creators out there from other teams and other mediums that you can collaborate with. And hopefully this is a good jumping off point for building that kind of community in MLS. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with kind of general hosting, and I'm going to pop to Laura for this. If you can kind of go through just some intro tips, tools, tricks, any kind of information. If someone wants to get started as an MLS host, where would they? Oh, sorry, I'm going to hop to Sophie for this. I've got my outline up. So Sophie, if you're getting started in hosting, how do you get started?
Before getting started, my number one rule of thumb is to always be yourself. Don't try and emulate anybody. Don't try and feel or try too hard to create a shtick. You really just have to be yourself. And some of the best football conversations for me are the ones that feel like you're just, down the pub, chatting or arguing over a penalty decision, with your mates. And so getting started for me, I always just felt like, okay, this is the kind of conversation I would have to have down the pub. I'm just going to apply it to, recording. And whether that was a monologue to begin with, just to get the tone of your voice, to see how you sounded, to start feeling comfortable with your own sound, I think is a really good exercise and a really good idea. So then when you go into a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you're already comfortable in your own skin and you can focus more on your guest, which should always be the number one thing. Focusing on your guest. And one of the best tips I was given early on in my career is you may have a list of 20 questions as a host that you want to get through, but the guest is going to lead the conversation and many times leads it in a direction that you either didn't expect or the answer is so interesting that you want to delve into it more. So my other top tip is, as a host, get started, get to know yourself, get comfortable with all the elements that need you to be a good host. Know, from a production point of view, like make it interesting for the end person. But however, with that same caveat, listen to your guest because the answers will guide the follow-up questions. And for me, that makes for a really great conversation, is really listening to the answers before you move on to what your other set of questions are that you may have. Yeah.
So as someone, you say you've got a list of 20 questions. Where do those questions come from? How do you figure out what to ask people and where to start?
A lot of the times when I kind of evolved as a broadcaster or as a host, I actually stopped writing questions down because I feel like I'm a spontaneous type of host, a spontaneous broadcaster. Not a kamikaze where you have to worry about me in terms of what I'm going to do, but I just like it to feel as organic and as authentic as possible. But when you're starting out, it really does help give you an arc or a framework. So research is important. No, you always have to be prepared for the guest to maybe say something you either haven't heard, don't know about, or maybe even not be as educated on. And rather than scramble for a quick Google as you're focused on the conversation, is having a set of, points, not necessarily questions even, down that may come at you or that you may want to just be more kind of informed about, I think is key. So understanding the guests, knowing a little bit about them, but not diving too much into them, so you can also get across their personality in your way, bring something out of them that perhaps you haven't seen in a previous interview before. So that framework, I think, is important when you're starting out. But as you're moving along in your career, I think that, if you're the type that likes a bit more spontaneity, you don't have to rely on that as much.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that finding a different angle, finding a way to have them answer a question that you haven't heard in other interviews before is really key to make your content stand out, as well as have the audience kind of appreciate them in a different way. How do you as a host balance your own voice and your own style with, like, how do you find that direction?
That's a really good question because I don't know any other way other than to be myself. And yes, you have to pull the reins in sometimes. I can also be a mad, passionate Greek at some points, but I try not to allow that to, come to the forefront when there are hot button issues. Like, there's nothing more I'd like to do right now than go 8 rounds with Joey Barton, but also have the strength of Mike Tyson to go 8 rounds with someone like Joey Barton, who I think is just being completely and utterly disrespectful to players, the women's game, women's broadcasters, the work women put into it. So you have to try and balance those intense emotions and feelings you might have that, not only you feel affect you personally, but also your professional ecosystem. So I just think always comes down to be yourself. Everyone thinks it's really great to interview players. It's really not. It's really good to interview retired players. Players are very guarded and they don't give you much. Interviewing managers, I think, is always interesting because you don't quite know when you catch them on a particular day. But actually sitting down with fellow broadcasters and journalists, bloggers, influencers on YouTube, people who eat, breathe, and live a club on a daily basis, or a sport on a daily basis. Those people are really interesting to talk to. Their stories and experiences are really interesting to talk to as well. And I think the more authentic you are in yourself, you'll bring out those stories and your own personality, and people will get to know you a lot more as well. I've interviewed a lot of players and a lot of, male and female players at domestic and international level, and that's been great. And it looks really great on the resume. But I also think as a content creator, to be yourself and to reach out and tell stories across the spectrum. The kit man probably has some of the best stories, that you'll ever hear. And I think, that's what I try to do. I just try to be as real as possible with the real people behind the sport.
I love that. I think that's super important, is that, yeah, the allure of interviewing a player is huge, but it's not necessarily the best information that you're going to get. One last question for you, Sophie. How do you know where to put all of that information? So you have all of these questions, you've gotten the interviews. How do you know whether to put it out in podcast form, video, written, blog? Like, where do you take all that information and turn it around to?
Well, if it's live, there's only one place for it to go. And sometimes you have regrets and sometimes you're very proud of those moments, mostly. Our show is a live show. We also do pre-recorded content. Pre-recorded allows you to, have more storytelling, right? And deciding what stays in and what is that what you're talking about in terms of content and what stays in, what stays out? Did I understand that right? Yeah. Okay.
That's a great piece of information to have.
Yeah. So I love live. I love the energy of it, whether it's doing a YouTube show or sideline reporting. There's something about the buzz and the moment of being at a live event with like-minded people. We're all there for the same reason and the same goal. Pre-recorded allows you to do more storytelling, more threads, more arcs, visually gives you the opportunity to be creative, show off your graphic skills or your stuff like that. So, and it's hard sometimes to decide. Sometimes, it's dictated to by who you're interviewing as well. Can you take that out? Can you keep that in? I mean, I have an interview with a professional athlete from a few years ago that was really raw and real. And they asked me, like, after the fact, can you not post that? And to this day, I've never posted it. And I think that's important as well in terms of information as you grow and as your career evolves. Trust is a really important thing, whether it's from your peers, whether it's developing and cultivating relationships, because if you want to go into MLS journalism in particular, you'll be in the dressing room with players. If you're covering the women's game, same thing. It's a very intimate group. I remember when I first started covering the US women's national team training camp before the London Olympics, there were like 5 people on the sidelines and people interviewing like Megan Rapinoe and Hope Solo and Abby Wambach. And now it's very difficult to get access. Make the access count when you get it, but also trust, and build a trust, because you're going to need that. And players will start to trust you. PR teams will start to trust you. Other journalists will start to trust you. So I think that is a really important key component in when you're creating content in particular. Integrity is very important. And I think in this day and age where clickbait is insane, really just keeping to your core and trusting your work, and that allows, I think, other people to trust you, and you'll have longevity in this business. You really will. I've seen it and I've lived it and I've breathed it. And I think that really matters just as much as creating cool content that looks great on screen.
Yeah, that's all incredible information. If anyone has questions for Sophie, pop them in the chat or in that Google form that I put in the comments. I'm switching up that line a little bit because some of the things that you said, Sophie, made me think of, I want to jump to Jessica right now. Sophie, you talked about doing your research and knowing kind of the line to walk, managing your emotions when you've got some intense interviews or intense moments or things that are emotionally heavy that you're dealing with. So Jessica, I just kind of wanted to jump to you on this. Um, when you're doing research, how do you kind of, I guess if you want to start with a general overview of your process, but how do you manage those really heavy emotional moments to put out something that is still objective and informational?
So you mean like when I'm writing on like gendered violence or something heavier like that?
Something heavier, and also even just the exciting things, the wins and the all of these emotional arcs that come with sports. How do you balance that and create a consistent voice?
I think I'm an emotional person. So I'm not, I mean, when we were doing Burn It All Down, we didn't really have to worry about these things, right? Like independent sports podcast, we could sort of be in our feelings. I'm sure I cried on that podcast at some point. When I'm writing, you trust, like I often have an editor or a writing partner, like you're trusting the people around you to sort of bring you back if you go too far. But I think it's one of those, this is such a boring answer. You just get better at it the more you do it. So the longer you're in it, the more you can hear it in your own voice. I can feel it when I'm writing. I can better feel it when it's coming up, and to try to walk away, come back to it. I think sometimes it's okay to just be emotional about it. I think these things are incredibly emotional. I think men are incredibly emotional about sports all the time. Even if they're quote unquote professionals about it, their emotions are just different and therefore coded as acceptable in a way that women's often are not. So we have to be aware, right? That like, that's going to get maybe used against us. But certainly like, if I am interviewing someone who has been through some shit, emotion is important to me. Maybe I'm not mirroring that. Like I try incredibly hard not to cry in front of people, even when they're telling me very upsetting things. I don't always succeed because sometimes they're incredibly upsetting, but I do, I'm trying to be as calm as I can in that moment, but I'm, letting them see also that I'm affected by I'm not like a robot out here doing the work, but I do, I think you count on other people around you to help you. That's like, in all of this, in all the different ways you're counting on the people around you to help you. But certainly when it comes to managing how your voice is coming across.
How do you find that person? Whether it's hiring an editor, like what are even the steps to get started there? Or how do you find a co-host that you know is going to help make you comfortable as well as boost the content itself?
Sometimes you don't know, right? It is like a crapshoot that you're getting into, and Morgan. Wow. Special guest.
How do you find the perfect partner like this dog?
In some ways, I've really lucked. Like I have a writing partner, Dan Solomon, who's at Texas Monthly, and we've written a ton together, and that just works. It's worked from the jump, and so I keep going back to it. So that's a big one for me. Like with writing, I know we're going to talk about writing, but like when I find an editor that I like, this is different now because the media world is imploding. But I used to just follow editor. Like if an editor jumped to a new place, I would just try to follow them if I could. And I mean, sometimes it doesn't work. So you have to like admit that. I don't know, for me, I don't know, Sophie, how it is for you, but like, pretty quickly if you can work with this person, if they're going to match with you, if like the vibe is right, if they're able to curb you when you need to be curbed, or that you can curb them. Like when we did Burn It All Down, there were 5 of us, which is too many people. I love those 4 women, but like that is a lot of people. And And so we didn't really know. And we actually had a different person at the beginning. There was 5 of us and someone left very quickly, 3 months in, and then we got a different co-host. And so we were all willing to sort of go on that ride. And then when we were done, it was like when we hit the end, it was over and we could sort of read it. So I just think part of it is trusting your gut, which I don't know that a lot of women are necessarily taught to do that a lot, but my gut has done me wonders.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get into writing. So Laura, I'm going to toss to you as well on this. How did you get started? I know it's a very basic question, but there's so much. I mean, writing is something that we do from elementary school. So how do you find where you want to focus that? How do you get started in research when you're staring at a blank page? How do you find the inspiration to get words on it?
I think naturally I'm curious person. It's annoying. It's annoying to my parents. I know it's annoying to my siblings, to my spouse, because I really do sound like a little kid saying, why, but why, but why? And then you kind of learn to accept that. I think it's a process of accepting that that's okay. It's okay to ask these questions. It's okay to question regular norms. It's okay to question, this is the way that it's done. It's okay, to have feelings. It's okay to do everything at the same time. It's okay. It's okay that people call you a lot. It's okay that people call you emotional. It's fine. Like, you are your own universe. Like, I think that's one of the most important things that when you start off, I think that there's so many, I think formats that they want to put women in and women in sports, that it was very difficult to say, well, nobody really is writing how I want, like how my style is. Nobody really kind of looks like me or has my background experience, or, so that for me was very difficult in the beginning, which was a process, because when you're writing, it freaks you out because you're like, this is my one shot. But it's really not. You're going to have more shots. It's fine. But at that moment, you see that page and you're freaking out because you're like, they contacted me. What am I going to do? And for me, I started off in Spanish, writing a lot in Spanish, soccer. In my house, I'm Colombian. So for me, soccer has been something that my father played semi-pro. My brother almost went pro. So it's the men in the house that were very impotent, like in sports. And then my mom was like, why are you watching sports with them? Why do you want to play soccer? I mean, she was always supportive of me because she's a very strong feminist woman, but for her, it was a change to do that. So I think all those things of your background and past, experiences and things sometimes affect you when you have that blank page. And I'm going in a different route of your question, but I think it kind of goes into when you see that blank page, you have to really remember who the hell you are in a sort of sense and say, I'm here, I deserve it. This opportunity is mine. If it goes well, great. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It is what it is. So for me, it's a process of knowing, what did the editor ask for? What's my take on it? How are we going to get that? Do I have an input of saying, I think that this player would be a better player for me to interview? And know that sometimes players are not going to want to give you an interview. I've had that. Like, the game doesn't go how they wanted. It didn't score. It didn't go how they expected. And guess what? You still have to turn in an article. So my thing is, I think on my feet, I'm like, okay, cool. He didn't want to talk to me. All right. So what was the most important thing in this game? Was it the score? Was it a red card? What was it? And I go with that. And then most of the times my editors were like, okay, that was a better story than what we pitched. Because sometimes giving excuses is difficult and saying, well, the player didn't want to talk. So for me, it was more like, well, the player didn't want to talk, but I got this one, which is better. So I think that comes with experience. And then I just forgot the question you asked me. I don't know. I just went on a rant.
No, I honestly, that's exactly what I want to hear. Like, how do you even know where to go? How do you make those pivots, and how do you get words onto the page? If you have an assignment or not, where do you find the story, and how? I know that, like, it's a hard question to answer if your brain is just constantly finding those threads, but how do you self-edit in those moments?
I'm not a good self-editor. I can write like 4,000 words when they asked for like 1,000. So for me, I think that's been something that I've had to work on a lot. And I do look back at the beginning when I started, and I was trying to more to kind of fit in, align to like the different outlets that were hiring me, because my writing is very colorful. And writing in Spanish and soccer, there's like 5 different words that you can say goal. And in English, there's like 2 or maybe 3 if you're pushing it, like US English. So for me, it was a transition of writing soccer in Spanish to English and making it colorful enough, but more informational enough for the outlets that were hiring me. So I would still keep that color that I love about soccer, about football. So I think it's one of the things that I do a lot of research. So like, again, I go into and look at the outlets, like what have they covered before? I don't want to do the same story that they've done before, and kind of look at also their style, because you're going to have different outlets that have different styles. Some of them are very numerical, very informative. Some of them are very colorful. So you have to find, again, your voice, and also following, you know, what the editors are looking for. So I think it's just really reading. You read a lot, and then you start to find the words that you like to use more than others. And you just find more things that fit into you. So I think you have to make writing fit into you. You don't have to fit into writing, I would say. You know, and just getting facts. I go in and I look at facts that I like, and I'm like, okay, I need to mention this in this story. And then I write down little things like bulletin boards that I think these are the kind of questions or the topics that I think I'm going to cover. And then again, you know, like what Sophie said, sometimes you ask a question, but they answer you with another question that it kind of just pops up in a moment. So I think it's important to relax and let it flow. And it's hard when you're beginning, because you're like, these are the questions I have to get. But, you know, you might get better questions from the answers that they're giving you. So I think give yourself grace, give yourself the opportunity, and everything's going to be okay. Like, you know, you just have to be like, I'm going to get through this. It's going to be fine. And, you know, you're worth it. I think that you have to remind yourself of that constantly, because it's difficult. You know, when I started, there wasn't a lot of women in sports, and if there were specific women. So I think that really puts a pressure on you of saying, if this is my last and only chance. But you have, again, it's like giving yourself grace and that self-love that you're going to be fine. You deserve it.
I love
Mhm.
that. I've got kind of a tactical question for you and Jessica, and also anyone else who has an answer for this. So, two things. First of all, how do you keep yourself organized? So, you know, you said you've got kind of like a bulletin board of information and facts and details, and I assume story ideas as well. Where do you put, just on an organizational level, where do you put all of those ideas?
Great question. I think it's hard. Like I handwrite a lot. So I have journals that I number the pages, and I keep up with stuff that way, where I'll jot down ideas. I've recently downloaded the program Notion. It's also on a website. And I have a folder in Notion that allows me, where I have work ideas. I'm very focused on my dissertation right now, but stuff will come up in whatever I'm reading. And I'm like, Laura, I'm with you. Like, you be curious about what you're curious about. Let your curiosity lead you. Like, why are you so interested in whatever you're interested in? And I will just like make little notes to myself about things I want to come back to. Why does it work this way? Why did they use those? I'm really into language. Like, why did they choose to say it that way and not another way? So Notion has been good for me as a quick place where I can put down ideas, but I'm often like literally flipping back through notebooks to see what ideas I wrote down. When I'm doing research, I'm a huge Google Drive person. Like, I bought the extra space on Google Drive. And so I will, like, famously, if you ask my writing partners, have like very detailed timelines of the events over whatever period of time we're working with. I will have a different document for people. I will have a different document for like interesting facts, like Laura was saying, if there's like a number, I'll have a doc for numbers. Like, I will have all the different things within a folder that I'm trying to keep track of, so that when it comes time to do an interview, I can pull from those different places the things that I'm still confused about or want to know more about, or my Alexa's talking to me. And so that has worked for me, but I will just say it's an ever evolving. Like I'll find a new thing and I'm like, okay, this is working better in this way. I'm going to try it for a while. So like if you ask me in a year if I'm still using Notion, we'll find out. But so far it's been really, really good for me.
Good old fashioned handwriting too. It's my my Wonder Woman notebook, by the way.
Oh, nice.
That's always inspiring when you kind of look down and you see Wonder Woman. So
yeah, these are mine.
Yeah,
Like,
writing.
yeah.
I've tried, and maybe it's a Generation X thing. Every single app known to man, calendar, to-do notes, reminders. I even use my calendar to tell me about my to-do notes. And in the end, it's like good old-fashioned, handwriting point, to-do list every day. And then I try to move on to the next day with as many ticks as possible. And anything that hasn't been ticked on that day moves to the following day. So very old school, but it works.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I also like this is my daily to-do list, and every day something moves to the next day, or I cross off what I can. So pen and paper sometimes feels like, you're actually getting it out there. Anyone else have kind of an organizational trick that they've got?
I think I want to echo also what Sophie and Jessica said about writing. I do a lot of writing, but I learned a lesson that, sometimes you're drinking coffee and the coffee doesn't go where you want it to go, and it goes within that paper. So it's brought me to start to use my cell phone a little more. And then try to do a lot of voice things. Sometimes when I'm doing interviews, I do 2 different recordings because I've happened before that recording is not recording, but then I have the backup. And I think also for me, there's different organizational apps nowadays that really help you. I'm very visual. So it's like an app. I use Trello, but I know there's more. If Trello listens, hook me up. Hey, Trello. But so for me, it's very visual because you can see what you're doing and you kind of give yourselves a to-do list and kind of move it, and you could put a to-do list within each note. So it's very visual for me. So you can, this is what I've done. This is what I've, did. This is what I want to do. And then my dream list, and you have all different colors, and you can color coordinate, which I'm obsessed with. So it really does help out if you're trying to be organized, and you also have that obsessive organizational that you want to, have a lot of things in your mind you want to do. That helps me keep grounded. But for sure, for me, that my initial instinct is to write with my hand in a pen and paper.
I actually, for a long time, just had Post-it notes on the wall. When I'm writing a longer piece, I will have just Post-it. And I use Scrivener sometimes to write, which allows you to kind of move stuff around. But I just I like to handwrite it. There's something about the tactileness of it for my brain.
I also send myself notes on WhatsApp. I'm in my own group with myself. And I send myself WhatsApp notes all the time. And when you just see it and you can't avoid it because we use WhatsApp quite a bit, don't we? So I always find that's really helpful.
That's funny. I do that with Slack. Sometimes I'm in Slack. I'll do it whatever thing I'm in, I will send things to myself.
Amazing. Okay. I have one more kind of research and writing question, because I know that at the top of the hour, we're losing Laura and Sophie. So what do you use to research? And I know if you've got educate university tools that you have logins for, but research can be expensive and it can be hard to find what you need. It's tough, going back through either newspapers or journals. Do you subscribe to all of the different MLS content pillars? How do you afford and access research? And this is, again, for anyone who does research.
I guess I'll go for me. If it's free, it's for me. I mean, when you're doing sports journalism and you're doing freelancing in the beginning and even in the middle of your career, you're not making the huge, amazing bucks unless you're in, in a huge platform. So I do a lot of deep diving of internet things. So I'll try to put specific words on Google, and then from there I'll go into honestly a rabbit hole, and it's 3 hours later I'm like, oh, what day is it? What's my name? but I try to do a lot of the things that are free. And then if it doesn't work out in English, I'll do it in Spanish, or I'll even start doing it in a different language. If I can translate, I'll just make it work. That's worked for me just because I like to read in general. And I have a lot of useless facts in my brain flying around. But I think that, again, I write those different websites that I found, random websites that I found that helped me find like numerical stats or player bios, or like, how many times I've found like information that nobody has been able to find, and I find it on Twitter or on Instagram because like, one of the cousins posted that they're going to this team and blah, blah, blah. So it's not stalking. I do I do a lot of Instagram and Facebook research because I feel like people are proud of like who they're with and they're, this team and that. So that has helped me a lot as well. So it's like really connecting to the team, to the people that follow the team, and the people that are behind the team, because they know a lot of things that might not be on, Google or whatever research that you're doing. So for me, I would bring it down to like people in general, social media, and the internet, but also go back to books, because there's a lot of books that might not be updated with the numbers, but that information is there that'll help you lead to what you're looking for. And then if you can afford it and you can pay, there's a lot of tools out there. I've just done it the free way because it just works for me.
Yeah, I think.
I
go,
would
Sophie.
No. Go on, Jessica. After you.
I do subscribe to a fair amount of things. Right now, because I'm a student at UT, I get all that kind of access, which is like, if also just be friends with people. Like, and I mean this, like, I was trying to find a Dallas Morning News article from blah, 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 blah. Their archives don't work anymore. I did a ton of reporting on Baylor, college football stuff. And so I know a woman from the Dallas Morning News, and I like texted her and I said, do you have access to the archive? And she did. And then I was looking for a Statesman article, and it's like the year that I needed it was the year they haven't archived. And I wrote a friend of mine who's at the Statesman, and I said, do you have access to this article? And he did. My friend Dan, that I report with a lot, like through Texas Monthly, he has access to things that I don't. So like he has access to the Wall Street Journal and Business Insider and like sites I would not pay for. And so I'm often like texting him, asking him to send me that kind of stuff. And I'll do that for anyone who asks me. He looks up stuff on LexisNexis for me, which is very nice, because as a freelancer, I will never have access to stuff like that. So I'm often asking people around me when I find it and I can't get to it, like, does someone in this universe have a login? Can you send me the PDF of that? And that tends to work pretty well. But yeah, certainly if they work there, that's like a bonus. But I do end up, like, if I'm working on a project specifically, I will end up subscribing, and then, the torture of like unsubscribing from a Gannett newspaper is like, ugh. But I will do it if I have to, so that I have access. But like Ancestry.com, I think it's the Mormons run it, and they're like, I don't even understand how they have all the stuff they do, but they have like yearbooks from like all over the States. And so a historian friend of mine has an Ancestry.com login that she gave me. And so whenever I'm looking for a yearbook, I just log in as her and just don't save anything to her account. And that has saved me a bunch of money that way. So I'm often asking people for help in whatever way that I need to, because it is hard with the way the media works these days to always get what you're looking for.
I was just going to add, research is almost not becoming a lost art, but it still needs to be taken exceptionally seriously, because one of the things that technology has allowed is for everyone to be their own news network and their own voice. And verifying your information is really important, because it can have a roll-on effect, not only on you, but on others, more importantly. So research is fundamentally important to becoming that trusted journalist or broadcaster I was talking about earlier. And I find some of the best content comes from, or knowledge comes from, other journalists. Like, I've really looked up to someone like Kevin Baxter from the LA Times, who was covering, soccer when no one really wanted to read about it. Scott French, who is almost a historian on anything LA Galaxy related, but also MLS and going back related. Nancy Armour from the USA Today, another great journalist who's been writing about soccer for a long time. There's Susie Rack from The Guardian, who's a modern voice in women's football, but just brilliant. Wrote a book with Leah Williamson, the Lionesses captain. There's some really good people out there who still research still matters to them, and I would find those people. And it's really important to also find mentors, and mentors can be a huge resource when it comes to research. And I'm with Laura on the free stuff. I mean, really, you should be able to find information these days in the vast stratosphere that is the internet. But if you're going to do that, just make sure it's always the correct information as well.
Yeah, double and triple check, because like Sophie's, just mentioned, there's clickbait and they say that something that's not. And if you go with the first one, please just make it accustomed to double and triple check, please, because that will save you heartache, headache, and stress.
And also there's like Anne's son, I think, who has a YouTube channel, young people coming up in the football world or the broadcasting world. They're going to be looking for information from others. And so it's important that we're setting up the generations to come with that same kind of informational integrity, because there's a lot of that, a little bit, with all these voices, like I said, that are lost. So the responsibility to younger people as well, I think, is important.
Yeah. All right. Massive thank you, Sophie and Laura. Thank you so much for being here. It's been phenomenal to get to hear your perspectives. Thank you. That's it. If y'all have any questions, you can again put them in the form and I will make sure that they get them. But thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions and do a part 2 if anyone wants to reach out, anyone on the panel as well. I've already earmarked a couple of people that are potential guests for my podcast, so I'll be reaching out, no doubt about that too. So thanks for including me, and to those listening, I appreciate you listening as well. Thank you.
And Sophie, where can people find you online?
I'm at Soccer Diva on the old Twitter sphere. That was a name that I started a long time ago, and I've been wondering about changing that recently. But yeah, at Highbury Squad on YouTube and Twitter, and you can see our content there. I cover LA Galaxy, and you'll find me on Corner of the Galaxy podcast as well. I'm looking forward to the new season. I'm going to be at the Inter Miami LA Galaxy game. So I'm very excited about the new season. And I think it's going to have some twists and turns. So yeah, at Highbury Squad, if you want to come find football content.
Amazing. And Laura, how about you?
I also want to say thank you so much for the invite. I think that it's important to highlight the different voices that there are in soccer and the ones that want to come up. So I think that's amazing for us, for future generations, and for the love of soccer to have those different perspectives and insights. Thank you guys, the ones that are listening, because that means that you are proactively trying to help the new generation, or the same generation that's coming up and that loves this game. For me, you can find me in Laura Gomez News or Laura Gomez News. I've been called both. And that's Instagram, Facebook, and everything else.
Awesome.
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks y'all so much. And we are going to take a hard pivot into photo and video. And we just got done talking about how to kind of use your networks for resources and paying for all of these subscriptions and ways to find information. When we get into photo and video, it can be really daunting because there are costs that come with both of those fields. So Morgan, let's start with you. How do you get started in photography? How do you know when it's time to like what equipment to get, when it's time to upgrade? What is your journey like, I guess, becoming a professional photographer?
Yeah, so for everyone, it can be a little different depending on their background and how much money they have or their parents have. I've been kind of fortunate where my parents have helped me at least halfway with some of the gear that I got, especially when I was in college. Fortunately, not really anymore. Adulting is not as fun, but they helped me get my first like professional camera when I was in college, when I knew I wanted to take it a lot more seriously. And then from there, I always buy used. That's also something that can help. But yes, sports photography equipment is very expensive because you need bigger lenses, and bodies are just expensive. So what I've done is slowly add on more. And for things that I don't necessarily have, renting is always a good option if you only need it for once in a while. Um, but there are people who are younger than me who have the best gear possible because their parents are a little bit more fortunate, and good for them. I know if my parents had that kind of income, that they would 100% help me out in that sense. But yeah, it's really just about trusting yourself. I've made this deal with myself that all the money I make from my photos can go into my gear, but I cannot use my own income for it. And that's something that's really kind of like, it hurts, but it helps. Last year I did pretty well, so I was able to upgrade certain gear. But like I said, I only buy used. I've never bought new. It's just way too expensive. And I don't even have some of the best gear that I should have. Luckily, I have a boyfriend who has like a good lens that I borrow from time to time, or I rent, or I have other friends who I'll let borrow my lens and they borrow mine. It's all about like building those connections and getting comfortable with other people. Where, like Jessica was saying, she has her friends in the news industry who help with the subscriptions. We kind of do the same thing with helping with gear. It's just sometimes it can be a little testy if you don't trust that person as much because your gear is very expensive. So yeah.
And when you're getting started, how do you know, like, obviously practice. Yes, like you practice and you get better, but how do you know even where to start with? Action photography is just it's just such a different animal. So did you take classes? What was your journey like?
Yeah, so I mean, I took high school photography classes, all of my 4 years. My school only offered 3, but I made my own curriculum for year 4. And within that high school, you learn the basic function of the camera and you learn how to take quote unquote action photos, which is us running up and down the halls, which wasn't great, but it gets you understanding what you're doing. I had no really intention of doing action photography, sports photography when I was doing all that photography in high school, but I knew I wanted to stay with it when I was in college, even though I wasn't pursuing a sports career at all. I was going for physical therapy. And I actually joined my school's newspaper just to stay with photography while I did my studies. And I was like, I can't not do this for the living. And I started shooting our hockey team and other stuff that we had at school. And I was just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And then I slowly started making the investment in myself as I realized that it's something I was very passionate about and wanted to pursue. Um, it is a really big risk because you're investing so much in that. With your gear, you can't just be like, oh, I want to try this out for a day or two, or try it out for a year and see where it goes. Like, unless you have that kind of spending money where you can, or you don't really care as much about the quality of your stuff, so you can use a lesser quality camera, which is always fine, um, until you realize what you want to do. I mean, we also had the option at one point that we had some equipment that we gave out to other photographers who didn't have their own, but they didn't have that when I was starting at the school's newspaper. So from there, I was like, this is what I want to do. And there's people who buy their own gear and fade out after a year and then they can sell it. I mean, that's always an option. But I really, really recommend making sure this is something you want to do. Start out with renting, borrow friends' gear. The way that I worked a job fair the other day for Sporting Jacks, and a lot of people were asking me how I started with photography and all that stuff. And I'm trying to find the right words for this, but you gotta just put yourself out there. And I recommended them if they wanted to start doing sports photography. It's not always an option. Like when I was in college, I could do stuff to get me comfortable. I could shoot all the sports in school, and then I had the internship. But for these people who are out of college or don't really have anything, high school sports, a lot of times they're always looking for help, or you can just show up to a field, which is kind of creepy, but I guess it's fine. I do recommend doing something like that if you have kids. rent a camera, see how that goes.
Borrow a kid, rent
You
a
can borrow
kid.
and right there, so cute. And it's like you kind of just have to put yourself out there because it's not something where you can just borrow a friend and do action photography like you can do portrait photography. I mean, I guess you could do a photo shoot, quote unquote, like if you bring a friend who plays soccer and they can do stuff, but it's not the same as match photography. So it's all about just trying and testing it out. And yeah.
And this is a question that I'm gonna ask for you as well. But how do you find your narrative voice in something like photography? And when we get into video, also, like, how do you know how to structure that so it still has an identity to it that's yours?
Yeah, I think what's unique about my situation, I don't know if it is the same for everyone, but I see that my point of view changes all the time with sports. Especially, I'll just do soccer for instance, because that's what I've done the most. So my vision has changed a lot. When I first started, I was so focused on the action of everything, trying to make sure I get the perfect action moment. And then afterwards, I really focused on the celebrations. That is still my favorite thing to capture, is getting the emotion, or I should say emotion in general, not just celebration, because I've had a lot of raw emotion in things. And I'm starting to work towards getting a lot more fan photography and fan emotion out of there. It's sometimes hard depending on where you are, because until recently, Orlando City fans weren't as emotional at games. I'm really sorry, Orlando, but you guys know it's true. Since I've moved here, it's grown a lot since 2021 until now. It's grown exponentially. It's been really cool to see. But I also feel awkward turning around, taking pictures of people in the stands versus like people on the field know they're getting their picture taken, where sometimes I'm like, I don't want to ask them for a photo because I don't want them to pose, because I want the candid. But if they see you taking a picture of them, it just becomes like, I'm just like, oh, I get so awkward. I just need to get past that point. And I'm getting there. I'm getting so much better. But my voice is always changing. My look of things is always changing. It also depends on the client. With USA Today, they do like that fan stuff, and they do like emotion, and they do like the match. You kind of get a little bit of everywhere. And when you're shooting for a club, they don't necessarily want the artsy photos. And same thing with USA Today. They don't always want the artsy photos. Where that might just go in my portfolio, and what I think is best might not be best for all those things. So I keep it for myself, but it just changes depending on who I'm shooting for. What the event is also makes a big deal. Like if it's a trophy situation where there's a trophy that could be lifted, there's going to be a lot more intensity, where I'm going to try to look for all those intense moments in the crowd, on the field. But if it's just a normal game, it's going to be a little bit more relaxed, where I might focus more on the match action, unless something crazy comes up.
And I think just hearing you talk about fan reactions and the energy of the crowd, I know, and this is, obviously an Austin FC heavy crowd, but I know getting involved in the supporters group, sometimes they'll get media passes for photographing the supporters section or field access there. So that's another avenue to kind of dig into, find your supporters group for your club and see if you can get some
For
practice that
sure.
way, because it's live and real.
Yeah, I've actually seen that a lot more recently. It also depends on the club if they're willing to do that for their fan group. I know Austin has a good relation with that, and I know back in Philly they've had that a couple of times. It's a little harder in Philly. I don't know how it is in Austin, but the fans don't go on the ground. They're kind of elevated above the tunnel. So you're always shooting up, which is kind of a little weird, but they would have access to go back and forth. Like when I was with Philly as an intern, I could go up to the capo stand and then come back down again to the field to get different angles of them, and then as well as the pitch, because I use them for marketing and stuff.
Awesome. Okay, and let's toss to you, because video is, when we talk about equipment, when we talk about editing tools like that, it's a whole slew of things that come up as, I think, barriers to entry. It's a harder thing to get into. So how did you get started, and what has your path been like through video?
So first, let me apologize. You're probably going to hear Coco playing in the background. That's
We love
that's
it.
kind of the way it goes. Okay. So as a teacher, COVID did do something good for us in the fact that we were forced online, and everything I mean, we just had to a total mind shift of everything. And so I got really, really, really good at capturing kids' attentions for over an hour through video editing. And honestly, I just used iMovie. You get iMovie, it comes with your computer. I'm not having to pay extra for it. I find all the different sound effects that are free online. And as long as you have action moving, I found about every like 15 seconds, we're like switching angles or doing something like that, capturing people's attention. That's how I went. And it's actually been really, really, really easy in that aspect because iMovie is just amazing and it has all the effects. I mean, and then if I don't know something, YouTube has it for me where I can just figure it out from there. Also, just my son, he is the generation in the audience where we're trying to go towards, right? And so he watches all the TikToks and all this, and he knows how to do all this and what captures their attention. So a lot of it is him, really. It's just kind of going off of his guidance.
And I think that's something that's really important too, is that there, again, we talked at the very beginning, there are so many different angles to approach content in. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the face on screen to drive the narrative and the content. And I think that's something really special about what you do, is that you've become the support and platform for someone else. So your son does a lot of the research and obviously hosts, but how much of your voice and your narrative do you add to that? Obviously with the angle switching and with keeping attention, but where do you see yourself in that content?
I think that I provide him the opportunities. I use Twitter quite a bit, and through Twitter, I've gotten him the player interviews. I've gotten him, in all the background stuff. We went to go tour the media section of everything, and so I think that's where I play into. Of course, I have my own opinions with Austin FC and the transfers and all that different stuff that is very, very, very emotional. And he, of course, kind of plays off of that. But in regards to like the actual narrative, that's all him. I just provide the opportunity and the publicist.
That's really cool. I love that. So you say you use iMovie. Do you use an iPhone to shoot all of the video?
Yeah. Yeah. And as you guys know, I mean, the iPhones are just amazing. And it's just like so good quality. But I am not at the point in my life where I can go buy anything better than an iPhone. So iPhone is the way to go. A cheap ring light is the way to go, and iMovie.
Yeah. I think that that's one of my biggest things, like in podcasting, which I'll get into in a second, is that we talk a lot about equipment and how expensive it can be, and that being a barrier to entry. And a lot of us forget that most folks have like an $800 to $1,500 piece of equipment sitting in their pocket every single day. The video capability and the audio capability of an iPhone are really good. And if you have access to that, use it. So ring light, $8 to $15 on Amazon. And that's an easy way to set up. Now, how do you do staging? Because I know that's another kind of key component of video that can be tricky. How do you know what to shoot, how many different angles to get? If you're switching during the editing, how do you set up all of those shots in the story as a full episode?
So we usually have a couple of phones, right? Different spots, and then an iPad. We have an iPad in the middle. Sorry. My phone on one side, my husband's phone on the other side. And then we actually took inspiration from Adrian Healy's video. Do you guys remember Better Lights? I'm not too sure if they're actually going to do that anymore. But we took all their background and we're like, that's great. We took an Austin FC blanket, put it in the back of us, hung it up using my fireplace. Just like putting decorations so it stayed up. All the different scarves that we gotten for free, the playoffs mug, of course, he has his water in that he has to use and stuff like that. So Adrian Healy, which by the way, I'm going to miss. I think I'll just keep it PC with that. But yeah, he has been a great inspiration. We actually had a conversation with him at one of the playoff parties, And he was actually talking to us about like what to put in the background. He's like, anything and everything that you have, just put it there because it's going to capture the attention, and find some Easter eggs that you can put in there.
That's awesome. And I love that it's just a relatively low cost way to create an awesome set, and finding inspiration from creators that you love watching is a really cool way to get yourself started. You don't have to start from scratch. You can use what other people have given you. All right, I'm going to hop into podcasting for just a few minutes here, because I know that, again, Austin FC feels like the MLS podcast capital of the world, and it's never enough. We always need more podcasts, if you ask me, because everyone's voice is different and coming at it from a different angle, and I think that's a really cool way to add to the club.
And we just need more women. Sorry,
honestly.
Steph, like you're it. And I like enough of these men, but I'm tired of them too.
Yeah, well, and that was kind of honestly, the inspiration for this is watching the footage from the tweets from the MLS media, of the Austin FC media game, and then even the fan media game. And Michelle Sanchez was the only one of maybe two women who were playing in both games. And so there are so many, I mean, look, there are so many female and non-binary fans of Austin FC who are so passionate. And I know that's the same for every other club out there. I know that you're all out there. And so we want to see them. We want to see you, and we need your voice. We need your voice. That's that. So how do you start a podcast when you hate your voice? That's a big thing to get over, I think, for anyone who starts to record a podcast. You listen back to it, and it's so easy to just put the phone down and say, no, thank you. I hate that. And I promise you will get used to it. I hated my voice when I started podcasting. I couldn't even listen to the stuff that I put out. And since I was editing all of it, that was a real roadblock for me. Like Adrian in chat says, when you have misophonia, when you hate like hearing mouth sounds and all of it that comes with a podcast, it's a really difficult barrier to get through when you're starting. Some of it is finding the right equipment and the right tools. If you record through Zoom is, even if you're the only one on the Zoom will cut out a lot of that background noise. It'll cut out some of those mouth sounds and anything that's happening in the background. So it's a really low cost way to do some pre-editing, so that when you are editing, you don't even have to hear those things. So that's a great way to kind of get over that hurdle. Getting over the sound of your voice is just something that will come with time, I promise. As I mentioned before, an iPhone is the best way to start. Mike and I do dog interviews in Q2 when the crowd is going, when the DJ is too loud. But with an iPhone, the audio quality, that like to be able to hear the dog sounds pretty clearly through the iPhone microphone is awesome. It cuts out a lot of the background noise, and it makes it an actual viable thing. So do not discount this piece of equipment. Go right to voice memos, record what you want. Audacity is a free program online that you can use to edit. For hosting the podcast, Anchor by Spotify is still free. So there's a lot of free stuff that you can use. It should be a relatively zero cost start for you.
Hey, Steph,
and then
can I just
Yeah.
say one thing quickly? We had a producer at the end for Burn It All Down for the last few years. So she was like expert in sound stuff, which was really good because we weren't. When we would have guests on, we would ask them to record voice memo. Like we would ask them to like stack a thing of books, put their iPhone right, like up by their mouth, and then airplane mode, voice memo, and then we transfer Google Drive or something to get the audio to us because the quality is so good. And I will just say the quality matters to whether or not people will listen. And I used to be like, whatever. And now there is stuff I cannot listen to.
Yep.
I'm like that snob now. But it does actually have a real effect. So when our producer was talking to guests about it, she would say like, this might be a little bit of a hassle. She made a little document that would like physically walked someone through the steps on an iPhone to do what she was asking them to do. But she was like, people will not listen to you. Like, there's no reason to record this if we're not going to do these steps because people will turn it off. So I always felt like that was a really compelling way to put it. And it's totally true. But yeah, you can literally just use your iPhone to record the audio for the actual podcast itself, as long as, you know, put it on airplane mode, because that would be devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, getting those like vibrations, those buzzes.
Yeah, that's hard. Yes, she is. Yeah, I remember when she had to try to take that out of something and she was cursing.
It's important though to call out that quality does matter. And I know for a long time the narrative was quality doesn't matter, just get started. But there's so much saturation of podcasts. People will give you 30 seconds to a minute of listening to your podcast before so it's not about the content. You could have the best content in the whole world, but if it's unlistenable, people will turn it off. And I say that not to bar you from starting, but just to know that it's a really easy problem to fix right off the bat. If you have an iPhone, if you have the funds to spend, even getting a relatively cheap USB microphone to plug in, wear your headphones, get yourself situated in a place where your audio is listenable. Record in your closet to absorb all of the background noise and the echo. There are a lot of ways that are very low cost that you can ensure good quality. And then people will listen to hear the excellent content that you've got planned. So speaking of content, always use an outline. If your goal is stream of consciousness thoughts, you always want an outline to give yourself checkpoints. So that's great as a style, but don't rely on your own stream of consciousness too much, because you want to make sure you're hitting different points. Exactly like Anne just said, people's attention spans are pretty short. So you want to make sure that you're switching segments pretty regularly or switching topics. If you can have a sound effect or music or something to play in between those sections, that's even better, because it just kind of wakes people up. And this is especially if you're doing a solo host podcast. Your voice, even if your content is excellent, people will start to drown out the frequency of it and lose the train of thought if you're not giving them constant kind of check-ins and reminders and little wake-up calls. Plan your different segments. Make sure that you've got a variety of content that you're covering, and find your voice. What is the vibe that you want to portray? For Swoon Tower, we are positive vibes only. And for soccer, there are a lot of emotional roller coasters that happen through any given season. And we've made the conscious decision to be a positive voice in that, not we're not barring ourselves of emotion, I think is an important thing. Like Jessica was saying earlier, it's okay to be emotional. I've cried on Swoon Tower. But like we're trying to see these players as people and bring that reminder to the table and that positivity. You want to find what voice fits you. Where do you want your angle to come from? Are you looking at tactics and analytics from a research point of view, from a live point of view? Are you looking at energy, emotion? Where are you coming from to kind of ground your show? You can veer from that all the time if you want to, but you want to have something to root yourself in. All right, so couple notes in chat. And does CapCut do audio, or are they just video?
No, it's audio and video. And it's free.
All right.
And it's amazing.
Didn't realize that. So yeah, CapCut, another great tool. I knew for short form video, it's really good, but for audio also, that's great. And then we've got a question from Gina. And if y'all have questions, this is a great time to start either loading them in chat. You can put them in that form that I shared out. And we're going to start getting into those. So in podcasting, what are your thoughts of having video for YouTube as well as the audio platforms? I actually had made a note of this and then didn't read it. So thank you for asking. I would record video always. And this is something that I haven't done historically, but is an important note for myself to move forward in. You always want to record video so that you can repurpose it either for YouTube, you can upload a whole episode, or for social media, short form clips. It's a really great way to promote your show. All right. We've got a question in the form. I have a degree in photography and haven't photographed in well over a decade. Don't even have the equipment anymore. How do you find the passion again for photography when you feel like the technology passed you by? It's a really great question, Morgan.
Wow, that's a deep question. Honestly, can't relate because I haven't been shooting that long. But I think kind of what I was saying before, start start small. Um, if you have like any kind of youth sports, local sports, start getting into that. Or if sports photography is not something you want to get back into, which is regular portrait, models, shooting just for fun, start with your phone. Like Steph was saying, their phone is so expensive. It has beautiful camera quality. Thank God it has not caught up to sports photography yet, because then I would be out of a job. But like, please don't advance that much. But it is so good for portraits. There's so many different lighting and stuff you can do. I mean, I've seen like tricks on TikTok and reels about how to make photos even better on your iPhone. So I would say start small and with your phone at your hands, whether it's just shooting friends, family, dogs, cats, just have some fun with it. Even if you don't want to shoot people, there's landscape photography, there's food photography. Just kind of get yourself reacquainted with that. And then if that's something you're really continuously interested in, maybe rent a camera for a day, see how that goes, rent it for a weekend or a week, take it on vacation with you. You can even start with a simple point and shoot. That's what I started with way back when I was 10. That's what got me into photography in the first place. Just a little point and shoot. And there's so much fun stuff right now with like quote unquote older technology. Film cameras are back, and there's Polaroids and the little disposable ones. You can get those done and have fun with it. Try to relearn your love and then take it from there.
I think that I didn't realize you could rent camera equipment. I
Yeah.
don't know why I just never thought of it, but I think that's a really great way to just have fun with it. It's a low I don't know what the costs are around it, but it's like a low commitment way to see if you do love it still. And I think that's
Yeah.
precision
It also
camera
depends on what
video.
you're
That's
gonna
awesome.
rent, how expensive it's gonna be. But generally, like someone just put in the chat, like a local place in that situation, it's going to be cheaper than there's borrowlenses.com, there's lensrentals.com, and I don't even use those if I can't help it because they're very expensive. Canon Professional Services actually has an option to rent for free from them, and I need to take advantage of that. But in that kind of situation, you can even find Facebook Marketplace. They have a lot of used gear that's in really good condition. I'm in like a Canon gear group, and they sell stuff on there all the time, and it's really reliable. So, but like you said, local is the way to go for that kind of stuff because it's generally cheaper, and they're so willing to help point you in the right direction for like a lower model, or not lower model, just like a lower model. I mean, it's nothing bad about it if you don't not as comfortable with going. Like I have a Canon 1DX Mark II, which is one of the best sports photography cameras you can get. You don't need that when you're just starting out, unless you can get it. But I mean, I would start small and work your way up and rediscover your love.
Yeah, and I just want to call out Gina's comment in the chat. Normalize getting back into your passions, finding new ones whenever you want, no matter what age you are now, how long it's been. And it's so important to shake yourself of those fears. And I wanted to, we've got a couple other questions in chat, but one came through the form. How did you get over that fear hurdle to get started? And I would love to get everyone's answer on this. It's scary putting yourself out there like this. So how did you shake yourself of that fear and just dive forward?
I can start. I mean, since I started at such a young age, I kind of didn't think about the fear. But even now, I mean, it's very common in the sports world and or just like the media creative world that like you don't belong, you have identity issues, you're just I forget what the term is, but it's like you just don't feel right. You don't I like you're just not feeling it. And I just know I had to keep reminding myself I am talented. I'm where I'm supposed to be. And yeah, you just got to push forward. And if you have the right people in your corner, they're only going to help you. And like having a support system is very important during that time. I mean, my parents have been so supportive of me throughout my entire career. And having a boyfriend now who's in the sports creative world as well is something that's so unique that I've not had before. And it boosts my confidence in my ability just to have people around who can verify my thoughts that I am talented.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a good answer to this other than like, you just got to do it. Like if you're going to do podcasting, you can totally just do a episode you're never going to release, right? Absolutely do a practice run 3-4 times, like whatever you want to do, send it to your friends or someone else who you trust to give you feedback. Like you don't have to release everything into the public sphere that you're creating. And that makes a ton of sense, right? Because when I'm writing, I'm sending drafts to people, they're editing it, then we're going back. Like there's an entire process there before the public is seeing anything that I'm doing. But we don't think about that when in other areas. When we did Burn It All Down, there was one person in the group who just pushed us off the cliff, and I would never go back to listen to like those first 4 episodes. I just, oh God, who knows what those sounded like. But she just made us do it and promised us she wasn't going to publish it, and then published it, and then we were in it. And I hated her at the time. I appreciate it now. So that I think is part of it, is just make yourself do some version of it. And it's not going to be the greatest thing that's ever existed, but just remember that men make garbage. They make absolute garbage. They put it out all the time. They're proud of it. They don't get better. They just keep going. And I literally think about this all the time when I'm trying to produce content and I'm feeling that imposter syndrome or something like that. Like I will hear a podcast that some man has made that he is proud of, and I am like, you know what? I can do that. For sure I can do that. And so I definitely take inspiration from the mediocre men of the world with endless confidence. So yeah, I mean, it's easy, and I get that it's easy to say that, like, just do the thing, but there really is something to, even if it's just a little piece of the thing, to prove to yourself that you can even do the little piece of the thing will help you build that momentum. And you will just get better as you go. Like that is just, you have to keep remembering that, like, you don't have to be the best. You will not be the best when you start. And just, I don't know, trust yourself. Like, I just want women to like grab on to the opportunity that exists there. And I feel like people often talk themselves out of it before they even try. Like my friend was applying to something. She's like, I don't have all the things that I'm supposed to have. And I was like, don't say no to yourself. Let them say no to you. Like you don't need to say no to yourself before you even get there. Which of course I don't follow my own advice, but I've been trying to tell myself, don't say no to yourself, as one of my little mantras.
You know, I think a good little segue to get started is joining in on the We Are Austin TV live stream on Twitter right after each game. I mean, they take whoever, who just like wants to speak. And, as Jessica said, it's usually just a bunch of men screaming, wolf out and stuff like that, and kind of crying about everything. But there are zero women who ever join. And I honestly think that is a really, really great way to just like, hey, I have an opinion, and my opinion is more than just wolf out. It is, has some actual thought behind it.
So I think this is a really, the just do it vibe. And I think that's a really good kind of segue into finding other media streams or content streams that you can add to. So Mike and I, when we were starting Swoon Tower, and we had this idea for a while, but it was before Austin FC came or started, and we were going to do it for our Premier League club, but it's hard without living in England to do that. And so when the Moon Tower boys were like, hey, we wish we could have more content. We want to release more episodes. We were like, well, let me tell you about this idea we have. And so finding other content streams that are willing to host you as a guest voice to give yourself confidence and also a low buy-in. Like, you don't have to commit to every single week. You don't have to commit to a release schedule that is going to wear you out before you've even started. Getting on something like a fan-driven media for whatever your club is, that's a chance to test it out, to try it out, and to get your voice out there in a low commitment way. So I think that's really, really great advice. We've got a couple editing questions, which I love. How easy is it to get a hang of editing? So I mentioned Audacity. What's the learning curve if you have zero experience? And how long does it take to edit a 30-minute-ish podcast? It depends on what your end goal is for editing. If you want it to be really polished, you want to delete all of your ums, you want to kind of tighten things up, maybe rearrange some sections. I usually say it's about twice the length of the episode to edit. So a 30-minute podcast would take about an hour to edit. If you want to feel more relaxed and not cut all of your ums out, it's going to take a lot less time with that. And the learning curve feels steep at first, but you'll be surprised at how quickly you get the hang of it. There are still times when I'm editing either video or audio or whatever it is that I will say, how do you in Audition, or how do you in Premiere Pro? I Google everything. And someone else mentioned it earlier. I think Anne mentioned it earlier. Google's out there. You will have a tutorial video, you will have an article, you will have every little bit of help that you need to answer those questions. So in terms of like getting started, I actually have an editing, like a little slide deck tutorial that has all of the intro information. I'm going to do a slide deck of all of the incredible things that have been said through this webinar so far. Link to some things. Somebody asked for a USB mic recommendation, and put a link in chat for an iPhone lav. We're going to put some links together, some intro equipment, basic organizational things, any tips that we've talked about, resources. I'll put that link to the editing tutorial in. So we'll have that. We have all of your emails from registering for the event, so we'll send that out to all of you. I'll also
Can I just mention something for editing?
Yeah.
I really want to echo what Steph said about having an outline. Even if you just want to talk. One thing that will make editing easier is if you have an outline, and you're not just wandering all over the place and trying to come back and like if you have an idea from the jump where you want to go. For years I can't remember, we did Burn It All Down for too long, but we had a producer at some point who was like, you need to do pre-production. And we were like, that's a waste of time. We already spend too much time together. But we would have these pre-production meetings where we would talk through what the outline of that episode would be 3 days before we would record, so that when you're prepping, you understand like this is how we're going to move through the episode. I am an over preparer, so like I would literally like write down transitions to get me to help, so I didn't have to think of them I'm not great at transitioning on the spot. So I got better and better and better as we went, but like even stuff like prepping transitions, just so like those things would move more smoothly as I was going from topic to topic. That will save you time when it comes time to editing, like certainly if you're cutting out ums and breaths and whatever. But if you have a set plan from the beginning that will make just the entire process of editing easier for you. It may feel original, like when you first start, that you're wasting a lot of time on the front end, and then you will go to edit and you will be like, oh shit, and it will save you endless time on the back end if you're prepping enough ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a really great note. I've got a question on just the general technology for podcasting. Is Spotify for Podcasters a good starting place? Something like Audacity or Riverside? It's kind of dancer's choice on this one. There's a lot of benefits to different things. If you want to be recording video, Riverside is good for that. I've had some trouble with Riverside. If I'm working with guests, it's not always compatible for browsers, and you kind of have to do a little bit, like Jessica was saying, with the guest prep, making sure browsers are up to date and they're on the right browser or whatever it is. But it does record video. It does have an AI that does clips now as well. So if you're looking for social media clips, it's a great way to like lighten your lift there. Spotify, I don't use for editing. And so I don't know. I edited one episode once that I recorded in my parents' closet on my phone because I wasn't at home. And it was a little tricky to get a hang of their process. I think on desktop might be easier. Something like Audacity definitely gives you a lot more control on volume and normalizing all your levels though. So I would recommend, because it's free, recording and editing in like an audio specific editor if you're going to release on a podcast, just so you have a little bit more control over it. But yeah, again, test them out because they're free. It's great to sign up for a trial and take one piece that you've recorded, try editing it in 3 different places and see what feels the best to you. Because if you're frustrated with the technology, you're not going to keep going. And we want you to keep going. Any other? Oh yeah, Anne. Oh, okay, she dropped. So yes, please follow Anne on Verde por Vida on Twitter and watch that show because it is so cute and so fun. And again, to see kids really taking the reins on MLS media is a really wonderful thing. So any final questions that we've got in chat or in our form? I'm really excited to see the excitement in chat. And again, it's accountability. It's finding people who will push you off the cliff. And I think that's one thing that we're all here for. People who have been doing it for a while, who have kind of forgotten how scary it was in the first place, or how we got over those fears. Initially, being ready to hype you up, find yourself someone to hype you to the moon. Because sometimes that's all it takes, is someone like with golden retriever energy to tell you that you can and should do this.
The other thing I want to say, I always tell people this, just ask for help. Like, be willing to ask people who will never respond to you. They're too big. They're ask them. Just ask. It can never, like, I guess they could say no. Most of the time they just don't say anything. But a lot of the time they say yes. And then, like, when we did our 100th episode for Burn It All Down, I was like, God, the person I would love to talk to is Doris Burke. But like, that's never going to happen. And guess who showed up on episode 100 of Burn It All Down? Like, that was so thrilling for me. I just think like networking is important. Like, who you know matters, which is such, but it's true. Like, if I could ever help anyone who's here, do whatever, happy to do it. Like, you gotta ask. Most people will help you. If you have like try to be specific about what it is that you're looking for, if you can. But I don't know. I just think that has helped me so much. For writers, there's a big thing of like, when I'm a freelancer, so I'm always pitching to places and you're trying to find the editor, and I'll be like, do I know anyone who's written for this place? I'm going to ask them, can you introduce me to that editor? That's worked for me endless amounts of time. So, it is the same sort of thing as like, just go do the podcast. But like, it is that thing, like you just have to ask. And that is how everyone does it. They just don't talk about it a lot. So everyone is out there and behind the scenes asking each other to help them, right? And you can get a long way doing that. And I just love your dog. Your dog is so cute.
Yeah. Yeah. The worst you can get is a no, and the best you can get is a new support system. So I'm excited for that to come out of this. If you are here live, if you are watching, if you're in Austin, come to our house and record a test episode. You know, like, we've got the equipment here, and we want to see more people creating content. So that's a great zero cost barrier to enter, and you get to hang out with us. We've got one last question in chat, which is, how do you handle a creation schedule? Which is a beast of a question on its own. I'm gonna, maybe Morgan, how do you, so with photography, how do you keep things consistent? How do you keep releases and deliverables consistent? Where do you start?
For me, in terms of schedule, it's whenever there's games going on, and then it's first come, first serve. Whoever's asked me, unless it's not a paid gig, then I go to the paid gig, which doesn't really happen anymore. But sometimes I help out a friend, and I'll take they understand as well, especially if they're asking me to do it for free. But it doesn't happen anymore. Always weekends for the most part. So there can be a little bit of overlap sometimes. You just gotta do whoever I agreed with first. And then as far as deliverables, it depends on the organization. Everywhere, USA Today has like a strict thing. There's a certain amount of photos I have to get in within like an hour or two after the game throughout the game. So I'm uploading as the game goes on, and about 50 before I can leave the stadium. But generally by the time all of that has released, oh, hello, look, there's another doggy. But by the time I'm about to leave or the game's over, I've already uploaded a decent amount. And then I have 48 hours to upload anything else that I wanted that I might have missed when I was doing my initial upload. Then for specific team stuff, really just depends on their preference. Generally, I submit photos throughout the game so their team can use it on social, graphics, all that stuff. And then they're a little bit more lax when the rest of the album comes. I've had people, I don't have to send them anything after the game ends. Others within a week or a couple days. It just depends on how much they're going to use. Generally, if a team lost the game, they don't really want the photos anymore. And then if they win the game, then they probably want all of them. But yeah.
Jessica, I imagine it's similar for you because you kind of have more like different, it's not a consistent deadline.
Not with the writing that I do, no. But I do think if you're going to do like a blog, I guess newsletter is now what we're calling it, which is basically a blog, or even a podcast, I do think having a set schedule, you do have to be honest with yourself what you can actually manage. But I do think people's expectations get set. If I woke up on a Tuesday and there wasn't a moon tower, I would be like, what the fuck has happened? I would be texting Landon and Jeremiah to find out where the hell they are. Like, there is a way that you come, like that people who read you or listen to you do come to expect, it helps keep that fan base, those listeners, those readers. So, like one thing about Burn It All Down and one reason we stopped was because we were doing weekly, and by the time we finished, it was twice a week. There was the chatty part and the interview part, and it was just exhausting. Like it is a hard schedule to maintain. And we had discussed like just slowing down, like doing it less. And obviously we just decided not to anymore. But I do think consistency is important if you're going to be doing a newsletter or a podcast, but just figure out what that is for you, like what you can actually maintain, and set that expectation and start there.
Yeah, usually when people are starting podcasts, I try to recommend having a month or two of backlog, which is a lot harder in live sports when you're doing reaction-based episodes. But I think there's still a way that you can get a few episodes recorded, or maybe get a segment that doesn't require game reaction to add on. So if you're doing a player profile, you've got however many episodes that you can record if you want to do your research, do your social media presence. If you want to do your overview and record that, get a bunch done, and you can tack that onto your episode with a game reaction after. So having
we would bank interviews.
Yep.
It didn't always work out that way. We would scramble more than we wanted to, but there were times where there were like 4 interviews just sitting there and the producer had edited them and then she would just insert them when we got there. And so part of it too is like, can I use it? Like, can I do an interview in a way that will make it so if someone listens in a month, it will still be relevant? Like, we would bump stuff because like something would happen. And it was like, can we get that person instead? And then the interview would get bumped. But man, that was a nice thing to have.
Yeah, it's always good to have backlog. And then also to not overload your release schedule. When you're starting, commit to once a month or twice a month rather than weekly. If you've got enough and you have the stamina to bump it to weekly, that's awesome. Everyone will be excited about an increase, but like Jessica said, you don't want to overload yourself too fast at the beginning. You want to give yourself a little bit of time to pace it out first. And again, test episodes, watch old games and do a recording based on that old game, get it done, listen back to it, see what you like, what you don't like, what you want to change, and you'll figure out your format and your style from there.
Talk about the stuff that you like. That the stuff you like is the stuff other people like. And it does come down to trusting yourself and your gut on that kind of stuff. But like, if you are interested in it, other people are interested in it. And it will come, like when you listen to like Steph and Mike, they're so good. You guys are so good at podcasting.
Thank you.
In part because like your personalities just like shine through. You guys have great personalities in person and they come through on your podcast. But it's clear that you like what you're talking about. And you guys have chosen to talk about the things that you like. And I think that makes it so listenable, right? Like there's a reason Landon gets so excited talking about X's and O's in soccer in a way that I would never get excited about. But like that translates, right? Like I start caring about like, I don't even know, wing backs and fullbacks and blah, 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 whatever. Because he's excited. And so like, what are you interested in? Own that. And that will do you so much good.
Yeah. Find what's important to you and what you love. And there are people out there that will also love that, even if it's surprising to you. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you everyone for, anyone on YouTube who's listening after the fact. I will put together that deck of resources and tips from all of our experts. Morgan, where can people find and follow your work?
I am on Instagram for my photos at Morgan Tencza Photo, MorganTencza photo. And then on Twitter, it's just my first and last name. I tweet a lot of dumb stuff. So if you just want to see my photography, I would say go to Instagram.
Amazing. And Jessica, where can people find and follow you and your work?
My joke is always don't, but Jessica W. Luther. On all the places. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky. That's where I put like my random thoughts these days. But that's also my website. So if you are trying to contact me, you can do it that way.
Awesome. And you can find me at Kruggles, mostly on Instagram and through Swoon Tower Soccer Podcast under the Moon Tower Soccer Podcast. I really hope that y'all get out there and start doing it. We're here to help inspire you and encourage you in any way that we can. If you need help, ask, reach out to us, put a comment on this video, or hit us up on one of our social media accounts, and we will try to answer any questions that you have. If you have a supporters group Slack community, if you're part of something like that, or with your club, if you've got a network there, hit up some other female or non-binary people that are fans of your club and say, hey, let's do a thing. Or, hey, can you keep me accountable for doing this thing? Create a community within your community, create a community with us, and we'll push each other off the cliff in a nice and good way. Thank you everyone so much for being here, and we'll see y'all on game day.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Steph.
Thanks, y'all.